Taylor, an account manager with the Echo Group, and I'm very pleased to introduce Carolyn Spence from Alexander Youth Network in Charlotte, North Carolina. Alexander Youth Network has been a perennial presenter at these sessions and is going to share their approach to managing clinical workflow using the clinician's desktop application. Carolyn?
All right, thanks, Scott. All right, well, Alexander Youth Network's been using Echo products since 1993, so we are not new to the game. We started out using the HSIS, which is an old DOS-based version. It was very ugly to look at, but we managed that and we did a lot of stuff in that software, and then we made the transition to clinician's desktop as you know it, well, not as you know it today, but as it came out. And so with that, lots of new transitions. We got a lot of buy-in from our staff. Up front, we learned the data was important and had that vision from the HSIS to clinicians, so we continued to push our applications out so we could get as much data as possible, but we learned and stumbled along the way. So today, what I'm actually going to do is spend some time talking to you guys about how we manage clinical workflow through one of our assessments that I'm just showing you one process that we've implemented because I could spend days and hours because I just geek out over the whole thing. I love showing different things that we've done. But today we're going to look at the Comprehensive Crisis Plan, which is a requirement in the state of North Carolina. No youth, adult, anybody can receive a mental health service unless they have a comprehensive crisis plan. So first, just to explain what Alexander's does, is we are a treatment facility for children and adolescents with severe behavioral and emotional problems. And so we have a pretty extensive array of services. So all of those nice little arrows pointing at the person in the middle, that's the client. And they can receive any of those services depending on whichever stage of their treatment protocol that they're in. So they could come in, to outpatient, go from outpatient to residential, back to outpatient, into a foster home. So we kind of keep them in our array and just move them around based off of their needs. So it's going to, got a lot of challenges, a lot of different requirements, expectations, both from what we need to prove to our state folks and what we need to prove to our accrediting body. We are a Joint Commission accredited agency, so a lot of stuff that moving pieces that we got going on. So the first part, that's just a little bit about us. So then the first thing that we're going to talk about today is, obviously, as we built out this process, we wanted to identify our inefficiencies and our problems that we have, and just not necessarily what's going on in the application, but just what are the problems. And so I'm sure everybody experiences or has heard their clinicians say, it takes too long to do anything. I'm spending more time on the computer typing stuff out than seeing my kids. And they went to school so they could help kids, not so they could sit down and write textbooks. So that's one of the problems that has always been identified for us, and we just continue to pound on that a little bit. We noticed through our comprehensive crisis planning process that the document requires a lot of information. Our clinicians were probably spending about 4 to 5 hours on a comprehensive crisis plan. First 2 hours was face-to-face. The next 2 was documentation. They didn't adopt the, when you had to do everything in text, it's really kind of hard to do concurrent documentation because you spend your session doing this, talking to somebody, and you don't get a really good assessment of it. And so decreased productivity because the amount of time it was taking us to get those out the door. We also, as you know, that hurts the bottom line, which our finance department repeatedly threw in our face. There was no room in the schedule to fit more clients in. So kids needed services, but we were finding that we were having to book them out 7 to 14 days because our clinicians were having to block their calendars just to document. And we weren't bringing in a lot of revenue from doing CCA, so it's not like you can continue to add therapists into your business to do something that you're just gonna, not bring anything really in to support their need for that. We did have high staff turnover because we were doing assessments and requiring that they had them done in 24 hours. So imagine you've got 3 sessions during the day, that's already 6 hours face-to-face, then you get an additional 6 hours of documentation time because you're spending as much time documenting as you were seeing. And then we wanted the CCA tomorrow because we needed to get the kid into service. They were falling behind because they were handling phone calls, and just the stress was high. People were frustrated. We saw some staff kind of say, okay, we're going somewhere, private practice, somewhere where we don't have to do all this stuff. Frustrated clients, families, and partner agencies, and that is huge because they want, if they have taken the step to get the kid into services or to at least try and access services, they want them coming in. They don't want it taken forever to get recommendations out the door and get, referrals and all that stuff done. And of course, none of that can happen and nothing can move forward until the CCA is completed. That's the way it works with us. And then, of course, I've already mentioned that clinicians are frustrated because they're spending more time on the paperwork than they are on seeing the clients. So when we sat down, obviously these were our, and this continues no matter what project we do. This is what Alexander Youth Network needs to achieve. So no matter what I do, the first question I'm going to get from our CEO is, you need to make it easy, and I don't want to hear that they're typing all day. So we spend a lot of time on efficiencies. We want to increase the productivity, want to be able to see more clients, but also decrease the redundancy. So how many of you guys use Clinician's Desktop and you go in, you put the address here, but then you're having to put the address here because you're trying to do something else, and then you're gathering the same information over here because it needs it on this form? We figured out how to, it goes in once and it goes everywhere. So our clinicians are not spending time entering stuff 2 and 3 times that's already in the system. Big thing was concurrent documentation, making sure that you can sit at a computer and do the assessment with the client in the room. And it's not, impersonal or anything like that. It feels good. The clients actually get to engage in the process. And some of our clinicians even hand over the mouse and let their kids click on it. It kind of helps the buy-in. It helps them, see what's going into their own assessment and everything like that. So it's really kind of cool. We've seen some, some good stories coming out of that and how folks are responding to it. Reducing risk. Now this is huge because anything that we have to do, we got to make sure, one, that we're meeting all the requirements for Joint Commission, because the next time they come and do their 3-year review, if we haven't, it could be a pretty significant, loss or something to our accreditation. If we lose our accreditation, we lose a major part of our business, so we can't afford that. Also, we want to make sure that when we're going through Medicaid audits that we don't have to deal with the questions, the scrutiny, so we went and built this thing so that when we went into an audit, we met every requirement we had, but at the same time, the staff didn't have to spend forever typing everything they needed to type. And then we're getting clients into the system quicker because pretty much when they walk out, the CCA is almost done. So our process is review, refine, and define. So it's a fun process. We spend a lot of time talking, arguing. Conflict and confrontation are good. I always tell people, fight with me, fight for what you want. I'll let you know if I'm going to give it to you or if I'm not going to give it to you. And I'm going to let you know why you can't have it. Sometimes it's a violation of something that we need, that's just not right in that situation. But we do a lot of, I got thick skin, I got a lot of people yelling at me. I'm like, all right, bring it. It kind of makes it a lot easier, and the end product is always better when we have confrontation. So the review process, just so you guys, just to follow you through this one process of our clinical comprehensive assessment, essentially the referral source contacts our agency and we have to set them up right away with an appointment. And so we had to look at that process. I outlined for you guys a little bit earlier that it was 7 to 14 days getting them in for an assessment. And we all know that you lose or have a lot of missed appointments the farther out you go from the date they made the contact. If you can get them in closer to the day they make that call, you have retained a referral and you can get them into services. Review the information currently captured, that you're currently capturing. So prior to putting our clinical comprehensive assessment, and I'm going to call it CCA going forward, so prior to putting the CCA into Clinician's Desktop, our clinicians were doing it on a Word template. Everything was typed, and it was taking hours for them to type up all this information. And so one of the things that we did is we sat down our clinical director and we sat down our performance improvement folks. Performance improvement because they know every standard, every regulation, And then our clinical folks, because they want to fight for what they like to have in the assessment and stuff like that. But the challenge was trying to figure out what needs to be there, what versus, what doesn't really need, is this content really giving us anything? So we did a lot of that. So the process with that was, who is this question, so this question on the CCA, who requires it? Is it a Medicaid standard? Is it a Joint Commission standard? Why is it essential? What are we trying to accomplish with it? So asking all those questions for every single question on the CCA. Didn't matter how silly it was, we asked that for everyone. Every question in every field had, who requires it? Why is it essential? And is it a question that you don't need to do at the assessment, you need to do it at the service delivery point? Because remember, you're doing assessment to figure out, do they need the service? You're not doing the assessment to deliver the service. You're doing it to get them into a service. So a lot of those types of questions. And then, I think I outlined this. Do we really need the questions on there? How does that question need to be delivered to the clinician? And that's the biggest thing. On the Word document, everything was text. Well, everything doesn't need to be text, and I'm going to show you that a little bit later. You don't need everything to be where they have to type a sentence. Sometimes you can use stuff inside the assessment, just check a box, and the sentence prints out. So the clinician doesn't have to type it in all the time. Refine. So this is a different step. So once they've done all that reviewing of the CCA, then we want to refine it. So we want to remove the information. So take that Word document, pull out. We did it on a Word document first, pulled everything out, just to make sure were we going to get the same gist, once we removed it. Is it flowing nice? A lot of people tend to make these forms and you ask a medical question here and then you go down 3 pages and you ask it again. And so we changed all that. We looked at the flow. We wanted to make it easier, organized, so it was, I guess, a lot more efficient and stuff when we're working with the families. And then redefine information that needs to be captured. So is it clear? People tend to open up those nice little text boxes and have verbal diarrhea all over the place. Sometimes the information is not valuable, but your clinician just spent 15 minutes typing something that you don't care about, neither does the referral sources. So you've got to be clear on, okay, which areas are we okay with that, and which areas do we just want to know the basic and move through it? So we did a lot of drilling down on that type of stuff. And then define. So this is kind of where now they bring me into the process a lot more. And I'm going to stand out here because it's easier for me to kind of look at the screen. But this is where they bring me into it. So now they've got the Word document. Of course, they brought me in earlier because they always ask me a bunch of questions. But now they've handed me over their Word document. And I'm going to take a look at it. And I'm going to look at, okay, we need this information, and we need allergy information, and I need to make sure I got the medications and the diagnosis and the prior treatment. And I don't want my clinician having to go from my CCA into the diagnosis screen inside clinician's desktop, then open back up the CCA so they can start and do another page just to close it and go to the medications, because now I'm typing in the medications information. So that was where I come in to look at, okay, so what are the redundancies? What can we do? How can I make this more efficient, but also have the workflow so our clinicians are not having to go in and out because they forget things, they miss stuff, and we haven't met a requirement when they have to go in and out of a form. Automate as many features as possible, and this is really cool. I'll show you this later, but so we use the ACE, which I knew I was going to forget this. The ACE is the Adverse Childhood Experiences Questionnaire. And so essentially it just lets us know what is the level of trauma or something that happened with a youth in their so far up to this point. And it requires that the clinicians score it. So they spend 10 minutes counting up their points and associating numbers to each field that they checked off. That's like 3 minutes added on to a CCA that they don't need. So we automated the scoring, so they don't have to do that. The risk of harm, which is really another neat feature. We have AYN-specific risk or harm that we do, and based off the answers that the clinician gives, it associates a score with it. That score then tells the clinician what they have to do next. If their score justifies a safety plan, a suicide assessment, but it types it all out for them, so the whole risk of harm is completely calculated. We don't have the user error because some people are not great with math. And some people like to, even though their math might be good, they don't want to do the safety plan, so they put in something else. You see what I'm saying? So this kind of took that user error out of the mix. And I'm going to show you something really cool on a screen, but the additional assessment requirements, that's really cool because based off the answers that we put in the assessment, it automatically makes additional assessment requirements. The clinician doesn't have to type in, go make an appointment with a primary care physician. It automatically pops in as a recommendation from the clinician to the CCA. So that cut down on quite a bit of time. And then we spent a lot of time on looking at every field. Does this need to be a validated field or a checkbox field? Does it need to be a text field? Does this validated field need to pop up something else? We had a lot of feedback from our clinical director, and she's like, I don't want this form being so big that when they open it, they're just so frustrated with how much work they have to do. So our CCA is only 12 tabs long, but it's got a lot of information based, just 12, just 12. But it could have, if we didn't do the pop-ups, it could be about 25 to 30. So that just gives you some indication of what it would look like. But we handle it through, if you answer yes to this question, up pops something and you have to detail or clarify. But if you didn't answer yes, keep going. Now your time is decreased even more. All right, so here's the first screen. I'm going to show you the, I did screenshots just so everybody knows. I didn't want to take us into our application because if there's network issues or anything, I get frustrated when stuff doesn't work correctly and I'm in front of a room like this. So, and it wouldn't be network issues here. We have been experiencing a lot at Alexander's and I was not ready to deal with it. So, but this is our, when you open a clinical comprehensive assessment, this is kind of the setup. So as you can see, everything at the top is categorized. So the first tab is the Getting Started tab, and this is just kind of, let us know why you're here. What's your presenting problems? All that fun, touchy-feely stuff that you get initially. It's all on the first tab. Then all the other categories, so then we put all the medical stuff together, all the developmental stuff. Adaptive living domains, that's something that's a Joint Commission requirement. So we have a whole bunch of stuff. The biggest two text fields are the family, because as you know, you can't do a lot of pop-up on family history. You've got to actually type in what occurred. So you don't see a lot of big, long text fields. These are usually 1 or 2 sentences long, because we gather a bunch of other stuff later. I love the medical screen, because this screen here, we just did a whole bunch of cool stuff in here. So you can see that we've got up there at last physical exam, it says no. And then primary care physician, it's checked saying they don't have a primary care physician, so that would be why they haven't had a physical. And I point those out, those are not special. It's a validated field or a checkbox, nothing major. But when we go down the road to the additional assessment screen, you'll see why those are cool. So when you click on this button right here, client medications or allergies, it's a pop-up form button, but it is not a navigate button. A navigate button would take us out of the clinic, out of the CCA, into the form, and then we'd have to come back and open up the CCA. These pop up the actual medication screen. So what I did is I designed my own medications and my own allergy screens, but attached those tables behind it. So when I'm entering the allergy, I'm entering it from the CCA, but it has automatically already filled in on the client profile screen. So clinicians aren't having to come and go to different parts of the app. You can see here that I indicated that this child had a nutritional concern with a yes. Because the yes came, this pops up. Otherwise, it's not there, so the clinician isn't quite as overwhelmed with how many text boxes they have. They only see the box if it's required that they have additional information. And then a lot of check boxes and all that stuff on this screen. Here's an example of our allergy screen. The other thing I like about the allergy screen versus the one that's on the client profile screen, as you know, the client profile one is just the grid. And it's not quite as clear to a clinician which field is required versus which one is not. So when we do it this way, I make them fill in the bottom half and I make certain fields required. So that way it's visually known to them which is required because it turns yellow for the clinicians. So they can't miss it. They don't get that frustration level that they would get in just entering it into a grid. All right, this is a busy little thing, but this is, I think I mentioned to you guys when we did the adverse childhood experiences, we put that in the questionnaire in there, and then it scores it. So the score, that field is grayed out. Staff can't do anything with it. Once they enter the questionnaire and save it, it scores it, and the score is in there. And the score has stuff that's, it's associated with different things. I don't know much about it. I just built it. But an 8 probably means significant trauma or something like that. And so for our clinicians, it's valuable, but also because we're capturing the data in the screen like this and we have a score, later on, we have a natural born outcome. So now we can do cross-references, we can do correlations with diagnoses, we can do all that type of stuff. So we have a score there. And then, sorry. Yes. Yeah, I went and checked, because anything that doesn't have a, if it didn't have copyright, I went and did it in our app. But if there's a copyright, it's not in there. I wasn't taking no risks. Strengths, abilities, and preferences. We're capturing the client view. So this is an opportunity for the, the clinician to maybe spend a little bit of time with the parent. So they let the kids sit on the computer. This is the kid's view. Of course, we got to do some wording changes and stuff like that for the kid when they come in here, but tell us about your strengths, your abilities, and your preferences, and they can type in what they want. Sometimes that's cool because you get, kids, my 7-year-old loves to be on a computer. So even as young as that, they'll put them on the computer and they'll type out this funny stuff that you can't read, but then the clinician clarifies it with the kid later on, and they have, little laughs and giggles, and it helps promote that stuff. But then we gather the parent's view as well. So we're not just getting what the child thinks their strengths, abilities, and preferences are, but we also got the parent. We can feed this stuff into a person-centered plan, so we've got all that information for other things. This is our substance abuse questionnaire. We are not a substance abuse provider. We are not certified to provide or to do any type of substance abuse counseling. All we want to know is, did you use? So we ask six questions. Based off the answers of those 6 questions, we'll determine whether or not an additional assessment needs to be recommended. So if there's more than, I think it's 2 yeses up there, it will automatically add into our additional assessment recommendation. Child needs to go for a substance abuse assessment, which is great because then our therapists are not forgetting to make recommendations based off of answers that they're getting. And then we have check boxes down here, so your clinicians, if all of those are no's and the clinician's doing the assessment, they don't have to come and type not applicable to show that they answered every field. They just check the box. It becomes clear, I'm done. So this is, I wanted to show you, this is where we get text intensive because we want you typing in narratives for all of the family type information. We got a couple validated things, but it's just more or less, I think those become Joint Commission regulations that we are at least tracking it. So we just shoved them in as validations because we don't really need to put all of that wording in the assessment. This is, I just brought this up because this is a trauma screen, so we have all the different types of trauma. What's really cool about this is that now we can report on all of the types of trauma for kids that we're serving. We work quite extensively with the Child Trauma Academy, so they're always looking at our data, pulling our trauma assessments and stuff, so now we're able to associate this with some of this, what types of trauma do we have? And then they come out and let us know what some of the effective techniques are for those particular types, so it's really kind of neat. This is coming into the treatment history area, so we ask a lot of questions about restrictive interventions because that is we use restrictive interventions as a tool to manage highly aggressive youth and stuff. So, but then we ask a lot of questions about prior treatment. Our clinical director did not like the idea of having one question about, have you had any treatment in the past, yes or no? She actually wanted them to actually answer yes or no to every one of these questions, because what happens is they get into the assessment and they're talking, but they forget to ask, did you have outpatient? Did you have PRTF? The parent might cover, okay, he was hospitalized, and they spend a couple minutes talking about that, but then they never come back to talking about the other services. So we force the yes, no answer to all of those, and every time you answer yes, it pops up this screen so you can tell us more about that treatment, because that's an essential piece. We want to make sure that we have that and can track, why did they go into that treatment? It kind of helps us with the services we provide. Yeah?
Just a question. When the screen pops up because of a yes answer, does the main form stay on the screen as well?
Yep, the CCA never closes.
Interesting.
Yep, the CCA always stays open. So anytime, and the form actually pops up in the middle of the screen. But
and that's something that you've been able to do. So we can't have that on ours. I mean, then we're told it can't happen by our IT. So what you're saying is you certainly can.
Yeah, it's a standard WinDesi design feature.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Hey Scott, do you know, what's the name of that feature?
It's a window pop-up, and we can actually make navigate work as well. There is a function that has the window remain open even when you navigate to another screen and go back. So
Yeah.
a variety of techniques that you can use to display information and come back to where you were.
And just to put in a shameless plug for office hours, if you go to office hours, they'll show you how to do it.
Or maybe send your IT folks.
Yeah, I think I better do.
Just so everybody knows, because a lot of people get funny about this, I have no IT training at all. I'm a social worker. So everything is Echo self-taught. So inside your agency, if you're having difficulty with your IT folks, maybe identify strong clinical folk, because your clinical folks are going to understand more about your processes and the importance of data, and they're going to be able to push that more than your IT folks will. All right, so this is our clinical impression screen. These are all pop-ups. So you click on the button, it pops up different things. So we've got the mental status exam. It's all check boxes. There's not one narrative or text. Well, I think there's like one quick little text box here or there, but nothing big. Here's our risk of harm. You can see it's mostly check boxes, and then based off of the boxes that you checked, this bottom part tells me if they're high risk, and then if they're high risk, what has to be done, so the clinician knows before they leave that assessment that they are doing a risk, or doing, like for this one, they're doing a suicide assessment. So they know, okay, I've got to do a suicide assessment. I can't let the kid go until this is done, type thing. And we have some programs doing a CCA, not to bill it, but to capture the information, where they'll do the risk assessment, and when they're done, they'll notice, okay, I have to send the kid for a suicide assessment. So they don't wait to score it later. It's scored right away as soon as they save. All that stuff pops up, and then they pick up the phone and call the LCSW down to their office. So that way the kid does not leave campus. There's no risk of them not knowing, hey, I need it to do this type stuff. And then the problem areas, this is new. We just implemented that a month ago. And essentially all that is it's an area for the clinician to go in and let us know what is the problem area we're trying to address. What does that problem area look like? So the first part, the problem area is a validated field, and then what does that look like? Because we want to know how many people have certain problem areas, and you can't report off of text fields and get numbers and pretty graphs and aggregate data. So we got all that, a lot of validation on this screen, but we also have indicated if it's a problem area, is it going to be our treatment focus? Are we going to focus on this area, or are we not going to focus on this area? And the goal is that in probably about a month or two, we're going to take these problem areas along with the behavior description and roll it right into our person-centered plan, into the child's treatment plan. and connect the two. So now people aren't having to go to the PCP and figure out what do I call this problem area and how is it observed, because it's already been done through the CCA. So it will join the two. And then I also have created a diagnosis screen. North Carolina went to the DSM-5 August 1st. So we had to create our own diagnosis screen just because of some challenges with the new DSM-5 diagnoses are so long that there's no way you can choose the description of the echo-based diagnosis screen. And because it was mandated through the state, we had to come up with something different to handle that. So we have the DSM-5 in there, but for, just for reference, prior to going on August 1st, when the diagnosis screen popped up, we also had 2 buttons on there for the axis 4 and 5. So you didn't have to leave the diagnosis screen, you could put 4 and 5 right in at the same time. Now this is cool. This is our additional assessment screen. This is the one I love because it's just so cool. You see up here at the top, it says refer to licensed healthcare provider to address nutritional concerns, because remember where we answer yes, they've got nutritional concerns. When they save the document, it automatically uploads all of these referrals. So when you print out your CCA at the end, we've got an area for additional assessments where we're going to refer them out, and it lists all these things. So refer for vocational assessment, need to identify the primary care physician, and a physical examination is needed. All of that comes out and prints out right onto the CCA. Then we got our treatment recommendations, and one of the things that we did because of problems we had in audits was, for us, it wasn't good enough to come in here and just say what level of care they're recommending. If they recommend level 2 therapeutic foster care, up pops the entrance criteria for level 2 therapeutic foster care, and the clinician has to justify every piece of entrance criteria. So that one of the things we got from auditors was like, you just said he's okay. Why is he okay? What standards is he meeting? So we actually pop up the entrance criteria, and now we don't have that issue. This is the last tab, clinical formulation. So we got some stuff on here that isn't necessarily needed for the CCA or Joint Commission, but the CCA drives the authorization, so we capture additional stuff to help us get an authorization without having to have somebody else go type up an authorization request into the forms that is needed. And then we put this in nice green letters down here that you must review and confirm accuracy before you sign the form, because even though they do that sign button, it says that in there. We try to put it everywhere we possibly can to indicate that you need to read this thing. All right, so you saw a lot of checkboxes, you saw a lot of validated fields, you saw a lot of that type of stuff. Now here's your assessment, no checkboxes. Everything's text. We've got all of their past treatment coming into a grid, which is very clear and easy for people to read. And we've got a lot of feedback that they like it. Here's the only place that we brought in the checkboxes, because I did not. The feedback we got is people didn't like the mental status done in sentences. They wanted to just see the checks, or the X's. We bring in the risk of harm along with what action we're requiring. Problem areas, so and then it indicates if we're going to focus on it in treatment or not. So it's right there on the CCA. And those additional assessments needed, printed out right up there at the top. So everything is available. And here's the level of care criteria. So when it comes out, we recommend a certain service. And I realize you guys can't read this, but that's all right. It's got all of the North Carolina level of care, and you can see checkboxes and if they met all the different standards. Clinical formulation, then the signature, the electronic signature prints out. So your CCA is done. So they've done that. And the good news is we went from a 4-hour CCA process to probably about an hour meeting face-to-face with the kid, because we knocked out a bunch of stuff we didn't care about talking about in the session face-to-face. So we're seeing the kid for about an hour, and we're spending maybe an additional 30 to 45 minutes wrapping up the rest of the CCA.
Was that report, person reports inside an active query, or an active query report inside clinicians?
It right now is a crystal report that we have on our network for other folks to get to, because it is so data intensive that we found it easier to run on our network than to run inside clinicians. And because I designed it wrong in the beginning and forgot to do everything in a view on the first heard of it and bring in sub-reports. So I have to go back and fix it, but I did something wrong when I was designing it. So as I mentioned, we went from a 4-hour CCA down to less than 2 hours, so 50% improved time. We actually are having more, we've opened up time slots so kids can actually get appointments closer to the date of service. We're actually at the point where we're accepting walk-ins now, so people are walking into assessments, which is kind of nice. From a user, these are just user testimonials, way better than the narrative format that they used to have. I thought that was interesting. One of our clinicians said, yes, I did used to say a lot of stuff in a CCA I didn't really need to say, so that was kind of cool. They like the ease of the setup because it flows the same way every single time, it doesn't change. One of the things, we have a lot of provisionally licensed staff, so people working towards their licensure. And so one of the things that they like is it's a great way, I've entered my CCA, but my supervisor is working 20 minutes away or something like that. I don't have to wait for them to come back to campus and see what's going on. They can pull up the CCA, review it from wherever they're at if they got a couple minutes, give the feedback to the licensed associate clinician, and then they can finalize everything they need to do. So it's on the system. And we didn't think that our clinicians were going to like the entrance criteria, but we got some feedback that it actually made them think about what they were recommending, so that was kind of nice. Our future plans. All right, so one of the things that I got from the clinicians is they would think it would be great if we took all those check boxes and all that information entered into the CCA, could come up with something that would pop up and say, we recommend this diagnosis for the youth based off the answers. I was like, oh, that's a big project. So I'm not quite sure I'm ready for that yet, but you know, I just keep putting that one off. But that's when they want us to work on that one. We want to actually, we have inside our system tied our treatment plan to our progress notes. We have a state designed treatment plan, so we've tied it to our progress notes. We're able to pull reports and see how well they're meeting their goals based off of every note that's written on the youth. So we've got the treatment plan tied to the progress notes soon to be tied to our discharge process. We've got our CCA, but it's not directly connected to our PCP yet, so that's the next piece of this, is finalizing that cycle. Automating the discharge summaries. Because of all the information we have in CDT, I actually demoed this last week. We have taken our discharge process, which used to be, you know, big old summary of how the kid did during treatment, and we've got it down to 10 minutes. So essentially when the family walks in the door and you discharge them, they fill out one screen with 5 or 6 questions on it, and then hit a button, the discharge summary pops up, bringing everything in for the course of the child's treatment into a narrative so that when the family walks out the door with their youth, they've got a discharge summary to take with them. So that's kind of cool. And incident documenting and approval processing, and that's something that we want to get in our system pretty quickly, is all of our incident reports and stuff like that. So that's kind of some of our future plans. And that's it. Thank you all for listening. If you got questions, just put them up. Any questions? Or did you ask them as you went? Yeah. Yeah, the ACE.
That's in a separate form, separate table. You enter in scores, responses, and automatically generate score.
Onto the main CCA screen.
So is that a source procedure?
There's a trigger behind the scenes doing the scoring.
Okay.
Both that and the risk of harm both have triggers doing the scoring upon the save.
And then that also populates the document. But the score, do you have to save and refresh the score, or does it automatically come back as soon as it closes the pop-up?
We force the refresh. So our staff have been trained to, once you close the screen, hit the refresh button and the score will pop in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so when you're doing a screen, right, I'm going to try and walk through the best I can. When you're in DWC, you do a right click and then you do, you know, where you would go to edit window or create a window on that part of it. You would go down where it says link to pop-up window. So you're on the main screen. It already knows you're on the main screen. And then you go in there and I choose, I want to pop up the ACE screen, or I want to pop up the nutritional screen, let's just say that, the nutritional detail. So you kind of go in there, you have to choose the name of the window, so I called it nutritional concerns. I choose that from a drop down, and then whatever that field is on the main form, so let's say it's nutrition_C from the CCA table, you put that in there, and then it'll ask you what value do you want this to pop up on. I want it to pop up when there's a yes value entered into that. And then you have to indicate if you want it to pop up when you save or when you tab off of the form. Just a little caution, don't do it off of a save unless it's the only pop-up on the form. Off of a save. So like my CCA has probably, there's 23, I think I created 23 forms for the CCA. So there's that many pop-ups, and because I got that many pop-ups, I need to have the pop-up come when I tab off the field. Because if I wait for a save, now it's popping up. It doesn't know which form, it's popping up 23 forms essentially, but it gives you one and it could be the wrong one you want it to pop up.
And Reggie, they can help you with that in office hours, so very quickly they'll do it. Or we just schedule another one of those WebExes.
All right, any other questions? All right, thank you guys.